Okay. Um, I had to stop my recording from earlier, and I'm restarting this one. And it looks like I was able to combine I think it was called the Washington Command and the Washington Reserves. And so you see here now that Winfield Scott is in this unit card here, and the units under his command include the artillery unit and the engineers and the supply train. I can continue to do so and combine these two here. Now you see that the combat power of Winfield Scott's unit is 52, as you can see here, and the regiment's is 36. We will see what happens to the combat power of the two when we combine it. It went to 96. So what was it? 52 plus 36 was 88. How did it get to 97? I don't know at the moment. I don't know. Maybe we can sort of think through that a little later as we progress the game. But we have a garrison here in Alexandria. It is currently garrisoned inside Alexandria. You can see here it's inside of Alexandria. I'm going to place it outside of Alexandria. And as you can see, once we've placed it outside of Alexandria, the breastworks or the defensive works around the unit card is gone. And so that's an important note that I want to just explain here, is that for each province or sort of each county or subdivision of this map, where there is a city or a township or village, like here, where there's a building, a chapel, and some buildings around it, there's also the surrounding countryside. And you can have units in the surrounding countryside, or if you take the unit card and hover over the buildings, you can see here, if you release the button, you release the button to enter the structure. And so now this unit is inside of Alexandria. You can see here there's a 1 here, and it states that it's inside Alexandria, and I can pull it out. No longer in Alexandria. There's no 1 unit card there. It is in the countryside. It's modeled as being in the countryside of Alexandria, and that is important for battles that'll come later. As you can see here, the Confederates have a unit stationed inside of Manassas, and it happens to be called the Manassas Guard. If you scroll over to Winchester, we don't have enough intel to know exactly what units are here, but we know that there are 2. We're close enough to Manassas that we know that there's 1, but that also the name of the unit is called the Manassas Guard. Scroll down here to Fredericksburg. Again, we don't have enough intel to know. We don't have the vision, but we know that there is 1 unit here. 1 unit. Okay, what else? It does sort of take a while to wrap your arms around. There are units like these 2. The garrison here and the command under General Scott. There are also units like this that are inside a fort. Now, they look the same on the surface. You know, they've got troops in them. They have combat power. This is 158. This is 97. This is 17. But there's a difference. There's a key difference here. And you can see that when you hover over the card. And so this red band and a red lock over the card signifies that this unit on this turn may not be moved from this region, right? So we scroll over and hover over. It says Winfield Scott is permanently fixed in the region, but will be unfixed if attacked. We go to the next one. The 8th US is fixed to the unit for 5 turns, and it is unfixed if attacked. The same thing for the US artillery, the same for these engineers, and the same for this supply train. So, in summary, Winfield Scott cannot move out of the Washington, D.C. area unless he is attacked. These 4 units here, and I think that if I hit Control, I can highlight more than one. They can move outside of the DC region after 5 turns, or if they are attacked prior to that. And again, 5 turns modeled in this game refers to 2 months and 15 days. So after 2 months and 15 days, we can move these units anywhere we want to, but at the moment they are fixed. Now we return back to this unit in Fort Delaware. They are likewise a garrison unit in the fort, and you can see around their unit card they have quite developed breastworks or defensive works. And we hover over the unit card and the red band. It states that this unit is permanently fixed in this region unless attacked, in the same way that Winfield Scott was, right? And so by looking at it, without thinking too much of it, you're like, oh my gosh, we have all these units that we can marshal and bring to the fight. But in reality, these are garrison units. And unless the Confederacy brings troops to this fort, we are unable to mobilize them outside of this region. And honestly, I don't believe that there will ever be an instance where we have federal troops attacking Fort Delaware. Partly because, to march there would mean that our armies were ineffectual in stopping them and crossing through DC and Baltimore and even to Philadelphia, because I think that they would have to come around Philly and into Fort Delaware, or they landed troops via ships. And the Union historically and in this game has a superiority in the naval department, and if there ever was an instance where Confederate troops landed in Fort Delaware, it would mean that we're doing quite badly in the naval department, and which means that we just are losing the war. So you'll see here that garrison unit was in this fort model on the map, which is different from these buildings. And so you'll see that there are forts scattered across the eastern seaboard, in New York, Long Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, all the way up into Vermont, I think. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Vermont is here. This is Maine. But the same applies to the South. The South, as stated earlier, also has forts that are garrisoned by units that cannot move unless attacked. Again, Fort Sumter is one. You can see here if we hover over it. This unit that is currently garrisoning Fort Sumter cannot move unless it is attacked. And I believe, if memory serves, they will be attacked in due time, but the game sort of... yeah, I think that they are attacked. I don't think that there's automation. Now, in other games, there's a script written where Fort Sumter just sort of automatically falls. But I think in this game, the Confederacy actually has to move units onto Fort Sumter. Of course, it's easy to take because it's just one unit and it is a battery, right? So you can bring troops, you can bring infantry and quickly take it. So it's not a hard fight for the Confederacy, but I believe that they have to manually do it. We'll see. My memory is that, but we'll see. What else? So if we go back to our lines in Maryland and DC, we see that we've got units in DC, in Fairfax, and in Annapolis. Annapolis being the home of the Naval Academy. And fittingly, we have a unit of Marines. These Marines can be moved in 2 turns. And if we continue to look along through to New York, we've got another unit that consists of the 1st U.S. Infantry and the 3rd Artillery. This is a 12-pounder battery, and both of these units may be moved after 4 turns. So that's simple enough. I believe that there's, again, some more units stationed out west. Historically, that is where the U.S. Army primarily operated prior to the start of the Civil War. And you'll see here, for example, for Edwin Sumner here in Sioux City, he will be able to move after 4 turns with this unit of infantry. This unit of cavalry can move after 4 turns. Likewise, this unit of cavalry in 4 turns, who is in Fort Smith and Leavenworth, respectively. So, and what's in St. Louis? Let's see. This unit of St. Louis is infantry and artillery, and they can both move after 4 turns. So I think they've beaten the dead horse there. This red band refers to the inability of that unit to move on this turn, and if you hover over it, you can figure out how many turns that remains the case, or if you'll find out that it's permanently fixed if it is, for example, in that fort. When can McClellan move? He can move after 6 turns. So that is important to know, because the United States and the Confederacy is not currently at war, and so if these locks were not in place, then we could just march on over into Manassas, into Fredericksburg, into Richmond, but of course we can't. This is, again, permanently fixed, right? So this is permanently fixed, this garrison unit. So we can't march our way on right now. We have to stay put. We have to trust in diplomacy. We have to assuage the northern public. We have to convince and persuade the South to not fire on Fort Sumter. But we all know that will be an eventuality and an inevitability, and war will be declared. What else? So naval units are another beast amongst themselves. They can fight on the seas. They can dock in ports. They can blockade ports and rivers. They can also transport troops. So I'm looking here in New York Harbor. This is the Atlantic Fleet. There's also a New York Squadron. And the Atlantic Fleet here is commanded by Admiral David Farragut. In his fleet, the Atlantic Fleet, there are transports, there are frigates, and there are steam frigates. So these are sail frigates. These are steam frigates. The New York Squadron consists of a blockade flotilla, a brig, and 2 transports. I will just combine them now for ease. So this is 4 turns. They all cannot move in 4 turns, so there's no point in having them separately. We will just combine them into a bigger Atlantic fleet. An important thing that we haven't yet discussed in the Army side of things is elements, and that's because there are not many, if any at all. There are not any unit cards that have more than one element in the card. And what does that mean? So let me see. Maybe in recruitment there are. There are not. So each of these is one element. Okay, so let's use this blockading flotilla as an example. You can see here on the unit card that there are little brevets. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it looks like 8 brevets, 6 of which are dark, and 2 of which right under are light or white. This refers to the number of ships in this unit card, right? If we hover over here, the symbol on the top right side of the unit card, it will display the individual ships in this unit card. And it's unique to this flotilla because it's a flotilla. It's sort of pre-made in this game. We didn't sort of create it. This was populated by the game, right? So, as you can see here, there is the USS Minnesota, the Powhatan, the Preble, the Pawnee, the Heitzel, and the Mohawk. And if you click on this, and I'll click on it now, it scrolls through each ship in this flotilla, right? So the first ship is the steam frigate USS Minnesota. The next is the sail frigate, the Powhatan. The next is the Preble, which is a blockading ship. It's a light warship, etc., etc. And you can see that, again, this unit card named the New York Squadron, consists of 6 ships. There's supposed to be 8 ships, and that is signified by these brevets on the left-hand side here. So there are 2 more ships that will be mustered or created and attached to this New York Squadron card, and they will be placed there over time. I suspect that they'll be placed there, I suspect that we'll be able to move this unit before these 2 other ships join the flotilla. If you look at these other unit cards, these ship unit cards, they only have 1 brevet. 1 brevet here, 1 brevet here, 1 brevet here. And again, this just means that there's only 1 ship in this unit card. And again, for example, this is the USS Dale. It only has the USS Dale in its unit, which is why there's only 1 brevet. And there's 1 brevet for the Crusader, 1 for the Iroquois, 1 for the Wabash or Wabash. Here there are 2 under the Cambridge Squadron, right? So there are 2 brevets, which means there are 2 ships in this unit card. First is the USS Cambridge. The second is the USS Norwich. They're both sail frigates. And if you look in this unit card here, you can see more specifics about the ship here. Its combat power is good. It has 15 hits. It has 63 cohesion. There are 120 men operating the ship. There are 15 cannons on it, and it is 1 ship. If you sort of scroll through these tabs, you can see some more detailed information about the ships themselves. And again, so that's the Cambridge Squadron. The first was the New York Squadron. The third is the Vincennes Squadron, which consists of the USS Norwich and the Santee. There's also this New York Scouting Squadron, which consists of a brig and another brig. You can see here that these brevets, again, refer to the number of ships in a unit card. And so there will be Army units, for example, that will have 3 or 4 brevets. And so there will be, one sort of, it'll display as one unit, but there will be multiple elements of units in one card, and that'll play a really significant role later on as we build up our army. And so another way to sort of tell that there are more than one ship in a unit card is that the combat power of the New York Squadron here is 115 compared to the combat power of just the USS Dale, which is 34, right? And these two other squadrons are 36 and 36. And so when you have more than one ship in a unit card, it increases the combat power of that unit card. And in the same way, the combat power of this U.S. infantry is 38, but if we were to add more elements to it, it would correspondingly increase the combat power of this unit card. Okay. I think with that said, maybe we can look through and take stock of what we have, the decisions that we have to make, and then move the turn along. So first, I think I want to look at what units I have, what I can move and what I can't move, what units I want to recruit, and the decisions I want to make. And when I say decisions, I mean I'm referring to the list of available decisions in these cards. I don't know quite how to describe these. These are sort of special things that you can do. Both sides have access to this, but they are they are sort of event triggers, I guess. It's difficult to describe. Basically, these are decision cards. For example, the North has the ability to suspend habeas corpus, and the effects of doing so are that you increase the loyalty of this region that you select by 20%. The cost of it is 3 victory points, and various means that city regions with 25 to 75% loyalty can be targeted, and there's a 50% chance of success. And each unit card has different effects, different costs, and chances of success. I played this game a number of months ago, so some of these details I do remember, others I don't. So I do know that I want to suspend habeas in as much as I can. And so another piece of this game is that when I, for example, click or rather hover over New York, say for example, it states that it is New York, it is clear weather, the civilization level is 75, there's a railroad that runs through it, it is a strategic town, and if you look further down, the loyalty of New York is 75% Union and 25% Confederate. And my goal in these beginning turns is to increase the loyalty of cities like New York to over 80. And I read this in one of the forums that AGEOD is discussed, in that there is a marked improvement in the output of certain regions after they reach a loyalty level of 80 or above. And so that is most impactful for places like New York, like Philadelphia, like Boston, and Chicago, places that have a lot of industrial output. Those regions should be prioritized for increasing loyalty to over 80%. So I will just pull up my decisions card. I will suspend habeas in New York and I think in DC because I want the loyalty to be over 80% and for those two regions to produce more industrial resources for the war effort. So I will click and hold. Oh gosh, am I not explaining this correctly? Or was it development? No. What was it? Was it draft? Was it just draft? Requisitions, plunder, clearing, You know, my memory was that I could do this over New York, but maybe I can't. Why can't I do that? I can. Okay. So earlier it wasn't hovering. You see, now it's not hovering anymore. Why is that the case? What if I drop it? Okay. I'm still able to drop it. I don't know. So the UI, again, is not the most helpful. It is not the most intuitive, but it still works. So if you can see there, I hovered, I clicked and held that decision card, and I placed it on New York, and you can see that it's reflected by this, I guess, coin here. The habeas decision has been made in New York, and it'll process over the next turn. I have one more suspend habeas card that I want to use. And as you can see, I can use it over Baltimore, or I can do that over DC. I think I will do that over Baltimore. No, Baltimore is at 55%, and DC is at, what's the loyalty for DC? DC is 55 as well. Yeah, you know, I'll just do it over Baltimore. Historically, Baltimore, there's a lot of Union sympathy. There was a lot of Union sympathy in Maryland, and particularly in Baltimore, and the sort of southern half of Baltimore along the peninsula here. Not so much in western Maryland historically. Essentially, there were slaves in these parts, and there were folks who wanted to keep their slaves in Maryland. And as troops were moving from New York along the rail lines through to DC, there was an incident in Baltimore where the troops had to transfer from train to train because one railhead ended in Baltimore and the other began in Baltimore. And so they would embark on the train in New York, for example, and that railhead would travel down through to Baltimore and it would end in Baltimore, and they would have to disembark the train and then walk through Baltimore to embark on another train to take it from Baltimore to DC. And when that was happening, I think there was a riot or there were protesters in Baltimore, something of that effect, and U.S. troops fired upon those folks, and there was a need for martial law to be declared, I think, in Baltimore at that time. So I will suspend habeas in New York and in Baltimore with the intention and hopefully the effect of increasing loyalty in those two places. And I believe that it takes 3 turns to process, and after those 3 turns, those habeas coins are returned to my, I guess you can call this an inventory, and then I will be able to select additional or reselect places to suspend habeas. I don't think that I have anything else that I want to do. These cards are helpful, in some cases, but for me, in the game that I want to play, I don't know that these other cards are helpful at the moment. You know, they're very sort of context specific. For example, the Scorched Earth card may be helpful if we're playing as the Confederacy and the Union is moving through and capturing some of our territory, and we want to ensure that they are unable to move supplies efficiently or to collect supplies as they move through the South. There is a really helpful card that becomes available later on, I think a year into the game, where I'm able to build a supply depot. And again, supplies are incredibly important in this AGEOD game. Typically, I will look to have a supply train attached to major armies so that as they move through the South, they can remain supplied. And the further away that they are from supply depots, and supply depots being these regions that are blinking in the supplied mode map, the further away we get from them, I believe the less combat power we have. So we just become less and less effective. You can see here that supplies and ammunition are modeled by these two icons on the map. The crates, these brown crates being supplies, and the stack of artillery rounds being ammunition. So I think that the strategy that I will take up is that as we move down through to Richmond, I think in Falmouth and in Fredericksburg and in Culpeper, I will create supply depots so that our troops remain supplied. Otherwise, all these other regions, let's say in Pennsylvania that I'm hovering over, these are not supply depots. They have some supplies locally, but if we were to operate them in those areas, they would have to pull supply from the supply depots. And so it is best to build supply depots as we move down south. And you can see if you hover over DC, it'll say that it's a strategic town, it's a Union objective town, it's also a Confederate objective town. Where does it say it's a supply depot? I thought it did. Okay, it is just signified by the blinking. Is that right? I thought it also said it was a supply town, or like a supply depot was there. Okay, yes, there it is. The very last line is Baltimore Depot, and that depot refers to it being a supply depot. And if we hover over DC, okay, we see there that it is a size 4 depot. Again, in Wilmington, it's size 2. Philadelphia is a supply 4. New York is a supply 4. So again, supplies and ammunition are created in industrial cities, for example, in New York and Philly and Baltimore, and they are moved along the roads and rails to other supply depots. You basically want to sort of have supplies pushed from the north down on through the south as the campaign moves forward. And so you want to maintain these supply depots as you move south. Thankfully, the North's supply lines are quite mature, and so I don't need to build supply depots along the East Coast. I believe that the South is much less. There's much less infrastructure in the South in terms of supply depots. What else? Okay, I know that I said we would take stock and look at the units we have, what we can move and what we can't move. So we've got units in the DC area, we've got units in the New York area that we can move eventually. We've got the Atlantic Fleet here with this flotilla awaiting 2 more ships. And the reason why flotillas are important is that they will serve as the blockade. They will simulate blockading the South, and you can move this naval unit to these boxes here. Of course, you don't want to move it to England or France, but if you scroll down a little more, we will eventually find the Atlantic blockade. And if you look over in the Gulf of Mexico, we will find the Gulf blockade. And so the more units we move here, the more effective the blockade will be. And the more effective the blockade is, the less proficient or efficient, productive the southern economy will be. And again, this will be a war of attrition, and the ability for us to attrit the South will mean better chances of Union victory. Okay, so we've got naval units in Boston Harbor. Okay, there are, it looks like 8 brevets, so only 4 are filled in, which means there are 4 awaiting arrival, and this unit is fixed for 4 turns. This is called the New England Squadron Number 1. And again, if you scroll over this top right portion of the unit card, there are indeed 4 ships in this unit card. The USS Mohican, the USS Mississippi, Macedonia, and the USS Congress. It also has other ships in this broader unit called the New England Squadron. Okay, what else? Yeah, tons of forts all across the country with units and garrisons that we cannot move and cannot use. There is the USS Michigan and the Erie Scouting Squadron that are docked in the port of Macomb? Detroit, okay. And we can move them in 4 turns. Okay, what else? Nothing up here. Okay, McClellan is in Cincinnati. Let's put you inside. So we've stationed him inside Cincinnati. He cannot move in 6 turns. Okay, there's a unit here. Okay. These are gunboats. This is called the Kentucky Gunboat Squadron. There are 2 elements. There are 2 ships in this unit card. They are the USS Marlin and the USS Gun. What's important to note here is that only gunboats can traverse these traversable rivers. And so we can't bring in, for example, these huge frigates currently docked in New York Harbor. You know, we can't have them traverse the Mississippi, for example. At least that's my memory. I don't believe that they can traverse them, but I will have to confirm that. Okay. What else? There's a unit in Cairo. It's another gunboat squadron. They are the USS Savannah and the USS Ticonderoga. In St. Louis, there is a unit of infantry and artillery. Oh, and we have a Mississippi fleet that is commanded by the Admiral Andrew Foote. He's got some gunboats and transports. Great. Historically, he worked quite closely with General Grant in transporting Grant's army from Cairo that was marshaling in Cairo across the downriver to where did they go first? Oh yes, no. So he transported the army um, of the West. I think it was called the Army of the West, um, under oh gosh, what's his name? Halleck, Henry Halleck, um, across the river and into the western side of. Oh, no, I think it was this here. Where's Shiloh? Paducah, Fort Henry. Where is New Madrid? Yeah, here, right? Where was Shiloh fought? Fort Henry, Paducah, Columbus, Humboldt, Holly Springs, Corinth. Okay. Is my memory correct in thinking that where did they? Island number 10. Fort Pillow. So my memory is that Admiral Foote transported General Grant's army. Henry Halleck was under overall command, but they transported the Army of the West down the Mississippi into what is this little river called? Is this the Tennessee River? I don't remember. But they transported them to take over Forts Henry and Donelson here and here. And then after they took it over, they marched, I think, a little further down into sort of this area. And then the army, the Southern Army under Albert Sidney Johnston, moved up along, I think, along Corinth. Were they congregating around Corinth? And they moved up along these roads and met somewhere here, around here, where the Battle of Shiloh was fought. And Shiloh was the first big battle of the war, where I think over thousands on both sides were casualties. I think that's what happened. I think that's where it happened. I thought that Shiloh was represented by a building here, but evidently not. I guess it wasn't a big enough town back in the day. But essentially, Admiral Foote used his fleet here to transport troops along the rivers to and really around defensive Confederate lines to effectuate the Union's overall strategy, which was to cut the Mississippi and strangle the South. Okay, I got a little off track. There's a fleet here in St. Louis, as well as 2 infantry units. There are some cavalry units here. Edwin Sumner's up here. Okay. And what about folks in the West? My memory is that I can't move them at all. Oh, okay. This is 4 turns. This is 4 turns. Okay. That's not too bad. That is not too bad. Okay. Nothing in Nevada. Okay. 4 turns. I can do that. Oh, there is a Pacific Squadron here under Pearson, Admiral Pearson, but I will not be able to move them ever. There will never be a time, unless I'm really losing the war, where San Francisco will be under attack. So these may as well just not exist, but they do exist. So there it is. Okay, Alcatraz, some more units here. Okay. I will just say now that my strategy for the West is to recruit a supply train and have them plop down in Los Angeles And then as we move on south from Southern California into Western Arizona, so really we're moving from west to east into this sort of New Mexico, Western Texas territory, I will build supply depots along here, and bring supplies, basically funneling supplies from California through on the desert into eastern New Mexico, western Texas. Because without that, the supply situation along, this is the Colorado River? I don't know. Along this river here is that supplies are being pulled from Denver, right? And so the other strategy, I guess, is to pull supplies from Denver and into the river valley here in Santa Fe. But that's just such a long way to have supplies travel, and Denver isn't, it's only a supply depot one, and it doesn't really produce a lot of supplies. Whereas, I mean, it's California. I mean, it's a supply depot four. You've got tons of supplies, tons of ammunition there. I think it's easier to push supplies down from California through Arizona and New Mexico into Texas, as opposed to from Colorado, from Denver down into New Mexico and into Western Texas. What I anticipate will happen is that the Confederates will push up this valley into Fort Craig and Valencia and Albuquerque and into Santa Fe. And then I will be able to flank them from the west as I move troops from California into western Texas, and then cut them off here. That is my hope, at least. So, okay. So I've got some troops in California. I've got some troops in Colorado, in Denver, and okay, I think that's it. I can also, I think I can click W, and I can sort of just scroll through each unit that I have. Okay. I don't think that's important. I've played this game before. I have a general idea of where is what on turn one and what I need to do. So I think on turn one, I will recruit this supply train, and I will place it in California. Yeah, I can do that in Southern California. I will do that. It'll take 15 days, great, to produce. I will move it down to southeastern California, and I will create a supply depot there, and then on into western Arizona and then eastern Arizona. Yeah, and it's important to note that the only way to create supply depots is by moving a pack train with 4 elements, right? 4 elements into that region, and then clicking on this hammer, and then building a depot. You see here. These other tabs I can describe a little later. They are important, but they're not important right now. And then did I spend all of my money with that? I don't think I did. Let's see what else I can do in recruitment. I can recruit some more troops in New York. Let me bring myself back over there. In New York, or in Maryland, or in Illinois. What's really interesting about this game is that there are some units that you can recruit anywhere. As in, like, these supply trains, you can build them really, anywhere across the north. Right? Illinois and Iowa, Missouri, right? Anywhere. But these infantry units, and let's say, for example, this infantry unit can only be recruited in New York. And that's so cool because that is historically accurate. Back in the Civil War, units were recruited from local towns and counties and cities, and they were specific to that place. So I think I will recruit this New York brigade. That was French's brigade. And it'll take, okay, so we'll see here that this brown band states that this unit is very static and is a very slow unit, that we should keep it in this region as they recruit, and it'll take 55 days to become operational. These two bars here refer to, I think, the supply and the manpower. And the combat power of the unit right now is 0 because it's still being marshaled. And there are 2 brevets in this infantry unit. So we'll see what's in here. So we have a 1st New York Line Infantry and the 4th New York 1st Scott Life Guard Infantry unit conscript. They're also in the line infantry, but they're conscripts. So as I said before with the naval units, these brevets refer to the units that are inside French's brigade, and there are 2 in this instance. They are the 1st New York Infantry and the 4th New York Infantry that is nicknamed the 1st Scott Life Guard. Super cool, super historic, really, really cool. Okay, what else can I do? I am down to 10 guys and 80 money, $80. Can I still recruit? I can. I can still recruit. And I will do so. I want more people in Illinois. I want to build up the 2nd Theater, and I want them in Cairo. Okay, these have now all grayed out. I can no longer recruit because I am out of people to recruit. I am down to 3, and these require 7 to recruit. Okay. Now, there's a really important piece that I have not yet described, and they are the economy. So if I scroll through here and I'm clicking through, okay, I'm pressing F1. F1 is the atlas here. Clicking on the atlas, I can click on it, or I can press F1. I think, right? Is that the atlas? Yeah, it is. Okay. If I press F2, it pulls up the war production. You can see here, yeah, F1, F2, F3, F4. Okay. These 3 unit cards are under construction. This is the supply train that I placed down in California. This is the volunteer unit I put down in Cairo. This is the brigade that I put down in New York. They take time. They will automatically fill up. They will automatically fill up over time. F3 is the War Department. There are no options available at the moment. F4 is the Treasury. The options are to move my capital from DC to New York. I would do so if DC is seriously under threat. Of course, it has its consequences. I can issue war bonds. I can print paper. I can raise taxes. If I look at F5, Department of Interior, no options. What about government? I can declare a complete blockade. I can offer territorial concessions. I can offer trade concessions. I can't. So what is next? This is the map. Oh gosh, I keep doing that. This is regions. I mean, they are important, but so if I'm trying to figure out which region produces the most, I can come onto regions here, pressing F8, and I can click on this, and it'll pull me to Suffolk. Suffolk being Boston, and then Philly, and then Westmoreland. Is that Pittsburgh? Hamden? Where is Hamden? Hamden is Springfield, where all of these armories are. Where's New York? I thought that New York was the most in terms of production of war supplies. But maybe they're not. Maybe it's for money production. Okay, which is Northern California and then New York. So what's New York good at? Is it conscripts? No, not even. You're third. Supplies? No, you're fourth. What is New York good at? Apparently not much. Well, I mean, New York is a big place and important historically. So I think next what we'll do is that we'll declare habeas in Suffolk if it's not already over 80. Where's Suffolk again? Here we go. Suffolk, 85. So I don't need to declare habeas there. What about in Springfield? I don't, because that's at 97. Okay, that's why. So I think that if we move loyalty over 80 in New York, the war production, the production of war supplies will probably match Suffolk or match, Boston. Where is New York here? Do you not produce shit? Hang on, let me figure this out. New York, you produce no war supplies. Why? You have no industry? Okay, that's interesting. You have no armories. All of your armories are in places like Boston and Philly and Pittsburgh and Springfield. I guess that historically makes sense. Orange, New York. Where's that? Here. That is Middletown. And you have the industry is denoted by this factory symbol. And you've got some ironworks and powder mills in Middletown. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. F9. F9 is objectives. You can see that here is a list of objectives for the North. They are to keep and maintain and hold DC, St. Louis, Baltimore. They are to capture New Orleans, Richmond, Nashville, Atlanta, Mobile, Memphis, El Paso, Little Rock, Vicksburg, Charleston, Norfolk, and Louisville. Here's the morale of the other powers on the map. The VP. Here's the combat power comparatively. What's cool over time is that as we fight battles with the Confederacy, the number of lost men will go up, and they'll also populate losses here for the United States. It'll denote casualties in terms of deaths and in injuries, I believe, and in captured folks. Our current morale is 85. If we get to 200, we win. If we get to 40, we lose. Our victory points are 50, and there's an increase in 38 per turn. Currently, the Confederacy foreign help is at 2. And I think that if it gets to negative 100, the British and the French will join the Confederacy. Our capital is in D.C., and this scenario, this game will end in 1866. Okay, that's helpful to know. F10. Okay, this is the description of the game and what we need to do. Pressing F11 pulls up our recruitment tab. If we click here, all, it is just Mid-Atlantic and all. And F12 is, again, our decision cards that we can place. I don't have any decision cards maybe I do. I am remembering now that there are some mines out in Colorado, I think maybe Utah, maybe in California, where I can place down more development and it'll exponentially increase the output. And I think that's right. Is that right? Yes, there's a gold mine here in Clear Creek, Colorado. And if I increase development, how do I do that again? Okay, here we go. Develop territory, 3 development points. Is that what it is? If I do that, So the civilization level in Clear Creek is 20. It is cleared. I think that New York was, I think, at 70. It was civilized. So my memory is that if I develop the territory, it'll take 9 turns. It'll increase the loyalty. There will be 3 development points, and an increase in 5 victory points. It'll cost 5,000, but the undeveloped and unpillaged territories can be targeted. Okay, I believe that the greater development of these very high producing territories, the more that it's developed, the more resources that are pulled out. And so, where there's a gold mine, I want to place development. So, another one here in Nevada, because there's a gold mine in Virginia City. And there's a gold mine here in Golden City, Colorado. I think those are the only 2 gold mines. All right, there are none in California. Let me just make sure. Oh, yes, there is one in Northern California, Sacramento area, but the development is already at 75. And so I can't, I can only hit developed territory if it's 25 or less. And again, this is 25. Sorry, this is 75. And so all of the benefits to developing the territory already exists in Northern California. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there are more gold mines. Okay. Okay. Now, to go back to our treasury, we do not want to move this capital to New York, at least not yet, and I hope to never have to. I do want to issue war bonds. I don't think I want to print paper, but I do want to raise taxes. I think these 2 are the ones that are recommended. Yeah. Because printing money will mean that I will have an influx of 800, money, but it will also mean that there will be an inflation, and the things that I buy, for example, the cost of troops will increase. So I don't know that it's worth that. But these 2 decrease inflation. Should I just do all 3? I don't think I need to do all 3. Okay, I will for sure issue war bonds, and I'll raise taxes. And it's cool that, it'll have President Lincoln's signature there. I don't think that I need to print money yet. Should I just do that? Because I think I can hover over this and it'll tell me. Maybe it won't. History available this turn. I thought that it did. So these 2 decisions will give me an influx of $800 each. It's really $800,000, but just simply 800 each. The cost here is 25 victory points, and deflation by 1%. And the cost here is 2 morale and deflation. Do I want to do that, actually? I think I want morale. I don't think that I want to lose morale. So maybe I do just print money and leave taxes alone. Right? Does that make sense? I don't remember. I think it's this. I think that as we fight battles, our morale will increase. I don't think that I should worry about morale, but I should worry about the cost of our troops and the ships that we build and the the ammunition that we produce. Okay, I will leave it at that. What about interior? Nothing. Government. Okay, yes, I do want to declare a complete blockade. This is a historical decision. We will blockade the South. There will be, of course, our blockade flotillas will be produced, and we will place them in the blockade boxes, and the South will attempt to run those blockades with blockade runners. So I'll just read the description here. The government has decided to declare a complete blockade and to interdict access to all Confederate ports. The measure may either frighten or strongly displease European powers, and such a measure can only be taken once. It'll cost $50,000, 1 morale, and 15 victory points. But this is essential to attriting down the South. The impact of this is that I will have more blockade ships appear in the blockade box, and the risk of intervention is increased, right? So negative 15 means that it'll be down to, I think, negative 16, and so the chance of Britain and France intervening in the war is higher with this choice, but it's a necessary choice. It's one that will help me, again, attrit the South down. Okay. I don't think there's anything else that I want to do on turn 1. Okay. I think we're good. I mean, there are other things that I can explain and talk about, but there's just so much, and I think that it would be better after, an hour and a half of talking, to just move it along and play as we go. And there's just so much anxiety to pressing this button, but I think we need to do it. So we'll do it. There we go. So here, loading master file. These numbers refer to the 15 days that will operate over the course of this turn. Okay, what happened? The new turn is late April of 61. Did they take it? They took it. And as you see here, they actually did have to bring a unit of cavalry to take Fort Sumter. Okay. We are at 88 morale. We've got all this money. Inflation is at negative 3%. We can use this money to build ships and recruit more troops. This is our influx of conscripts from this turn. These are our war supplies that have been produced by the mills and ironworks that are across the north. This, again, models our ability to use trains to transport troops. This models the ability to move troops via ships. This is our victory points. Foreign entries at 13. Okay, let's read our important messages here on the right first. So the Battle of Fort Sumter, it was a Union defeat. We lost our artillery. This is the battle summary. It shows that the 1st Georgia Cavalry attacked Fort Sumter and it fell. When the unit name here is in red font, it means that the entire unit was destroyed and removed from the map. So we no longer have access to the Fort Sumter artillery. There was no commanding general on either side. They just went in and took it. Interestingly, they took more casualties than we did, but we still lost the fort, which is historically accurate. And fine, because it means that the war is now on. Okay, so the next, fortifications started in the capitals. Fortifications started in both capitals Work on redoubts in the respective capitals of the warring nations and also in Alexandria, Virginia for the Union are started as both governments want to protect the most symbolic city of their nation. Players note, don't build anything in terms of defensive structures in Washington, Richmond, and Alexandria before July, as this is already underway and will appear soon and will be free. Great. Next. No corps before 1862. To represent the historical organizational difficulties and military thinking, mentality, and red tape, no corps are allowed to be formed before March of 1862. The button is grayed out until then. However, you can create divisions if you wish, but only after October 1861. A note to all players, corps formation is explained on pages 33 to 34 of the manual and divisions on page 35. P.S. Unit force pools, for example, unit recruitment allowance, will receive automatic additions between April and July of 1861. This is not a bug. This is not a bug to have little to build early. This is not a bug to have little to build early. Okay. I think this is just, they're just telling us that there will be additional additions to the unit force pools after, between April and July. I think that this is a reflection of President Lincoln's call for volunteers. So, as you recall, at the last turn, we could only recruit, I think it was one more, So, the only additional thing that we can recruit in late April of 1861 are these two units of blockade flotilla. And what that message was saying was that as April turns into May, there will be more and more units available to recruit. At the moment, it is just these 6, which makes sense. Okay, great. Sam Houston's fight against secession. Although Texas withdrew from the Union on February 1st of 1860, Governor Sam Houston refused to take an oath of loyalty to the... Okay, is 1860 correct? I think it's supposed to be 1861. Yeah. Because Lincoln was elected in, I believe, November of 60. And between Abraham Lincoln's election and his inauguration, the southern states began to secede. And so I think this is February of 1861. So, although Texas withdrew from the Union on February 1st of 1861, Sam Houston refused to take an oath of loyalty to the newly formed Confederate States of America. Houston accepted a secret offer of President Lincoln to use federal troops to keep him in the governor's mansion and to keep Texas in the Union. Colonel Waite, commander of the federal garrison in Texas, immediately established an entrenched camp. Cool, I did not know that. And here's that unit in Dallas. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Is that new? Did that happen in my prior game? I have no idea. Wow, then you can raid. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, cool. Okay, we'll come back to that. Wow, okay. Fort Sumter was bombarded. The Confederacy's attempt to extend its sovereignty over forts that remained in Union hands received considerable public attention, both in the North and South. When President Lincoln planned to send supplies to Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, he informed the state to avoid hostilities. South Carolina, however, asked the commander of the fort to surrender immediately on April 12th of 1861. He rejected the offer. Confederate batteries opened fire, firing for 36 straight hours on the fort. The garrison returned fire, but it was ineffective and the fort surrendered. Fort Sumter rapidly became a symbol of rival definitions of sovereignty and honor. What's really terrible about, of course, with the firing of Fort Sumter and the start of the Civil War, what was really terrible and interesting was that I believe it was the Secretary of War in President Buchanan's um, cabinet, was a Southerner, and a Southerner loyal to the state of South Carolina, and so in the lame duck period of President Buchanan's presidency, um, instead of working to preserve the Union, um, the Secretary of War, and I don't remember his name. It might have been. Nope, I don't remember, so I won't try. He funneled arms um, to the South from federal depots, right? So, and how terrible is that for you as a president to have members of your own cabinet to work against the interests of the nation, right? Pretty terrible. And in part facilitating what happened at Fort Sumter, right? That's pretty terrible. Okay. Carl Schurz raises German troops in New York. Schurz was an active campaigner against slavery and on the outbreak of the Civil War joined the forces of the Union Army. He helped recruit German immigrants living in New York before being asked to negotiate with European governments on behalf of President Lincoln. Very cool. He has appeared on the map. He is, oh wow, I can command him right now. You see, oh gosh, okay, hang on. I did a little too much there. Okay, so the New York Volunteers do not have a red band and a red lock on their unit card, which means I am free to move them around, right? I can move them to northern New York, up the Hudson Valley, right? It'll take them 12 days to move to Columbia County or Columbia region. It'll take them 24 days to march. Why are you taking that way? Why aren't you just going straight? Oh, okay, yes, because the rail is out. No, but then you're marching. You're not taking the rail. Anyway, okay. We will come back to that after we have read all of our messages. I am getting distracted. Okay. Lincoln's call for volunteers. To augment the reduced regular army, President Lincoln asked the governors of the loyal states for 75,000 militiamen to serve for 3 months, the maximum time permissible under existing law. He did not foresee a long war, nor did he really want a long war. The northern states responded with 100,000 men, but the call for militia to suppress the rebellion was angrily and promptly rejected by the 8 slave states still in the Union. I wonder why. The blockade of the Confederacy. The U.S. government declared a blockade of the Confederate States ports. At first, not much was possible due to the small size of the U.S. Navy. There were only some 40 vessels and 50 steamers, which was unable to blockade thousands of miles of the coastline. That is accurate. Okay, the Pratt Street riot. Okay, we talked about this before. I talked about this before. I am not a we. I am a he. I am an I. I talked about this before. So a serious incident took place in Baltimore. As a Massachusetts regiment transferred between stations, a mob of Confederate sympathizers attacked the train cars and blocked the route. When it became apparent that they could travel no longer, some nervous troopers fired into the crowd and chaos immediately ensued. 4 soldiers and 12 civilians were killed in the riot. In this instance, right, because the railheads were not joined, they ended in Baltimore, and so these troops had to take the train into Baltimore, get off the train, walk through Baltimore to take another train into DC, right, and to protect the capital, right, and because the railheads ended in Baltimore and they were forced to march through the streets, this riot occurred. And if my memory serves, like martial law was declared, and other units who were moving from New York on south had to stay in Baltimore for a period of time to ensure public order in that city. Okay. And Virginia secedes from the Union. Leading Virginia leaders and the legislature vote to secede. Great. Okay. So those were all of our units. What is this? Click on a center. Okay. So this just tells us that we have land forces without orders. And we can click on it and we can press the space bar. No. Okay. We can click on it and it'll tell us the unit that lacks orders. So how do we organize ourselves now? I think that it makes sense to, again, take stock of what we have where, what we can move and what we can't move the forces that we can move if we want to move them, and then recruit people, and then look at our decision cards and our Department of Treasury, etc., etc. But actually, maybe we do that first. So we look at the Treasury, nothing has changed here. We look at Interior, nothing has changed. We look at Government, nothing has changed. I don't think I'll ever offer trade concessions or territorial concessions. These two decisions refer to concessions made to Britain and France to not join the war on the side of the Confederacy. I don't anticipate needing to do that because I don't anticipate losing the war or being in a position of losing the war. So I don't think that we will ever have to offer trade concessions or territorial concessions to those two foreign powers. Okay, what else? This is just a nice overview of what's going on. I mean, at the moment, Great Britain has so much more combat power than we do, and we have more power than the Confederacy does. But I think historically, and we'll show in the game, the Confederacy will quickly recruit troops and will equal, if not eclipse, our own power. And of course, our power will gear up over time, but the Confederacy was able to do so more quickly historically. So what's here? Yeah, that's the garrison, right? And I just pulled it out. Okay. So we can't move anything in California, nor in New Mexico. What about Colorado? Nothing yet. What about our supply unit? Where is that? Pacific Squadron. Okay, here it is. So it'll take another, how long? 2 days. So one more turn for me to be able to move the supply unit down to southeastern California and to create a supply depot. Okay, so that's taken care of. Let's go to Iowa and Missouri. We can't move anything here yet, because we've got these red bands here. 3 turns. Can't move Sumter. Can we move anything here? We cannot. Historically, there was I think he was a colonel at the time. I don't think that he was a general, but a person named Nathaniel Lyons was a Union general. I think at the time, at the beginning of the Civil War, he was a colonel. I think he was promoted after his actions. But essentially, as you can see here, the state of Missouri, along these borders here, a good part of it, a good chunk of it, is politically controlled by the Confederates. And that's because historically, Missouri was a slave state. And Northerners from where's Kansas? Is this Kansas? Yes. Northerners from the north, from Missouri and Iowa and Kansas moved into the states and territories like Kansas and Missouri to try and make it free. I'm being very general here, but they're, oh gosh, what were they called? My history. There were a series of conflicts that occurred before the Civil War in these regions, these border regions between the North and the South. Was it bloody Nebraska, bloody Kansas? I need to do some reading into it. But essentially, Missouri was a slave state, and the governor wanted to declare for the South. But through the actions of Nathaniel Lyons and the troops that were stationed in St. Louis, they were negotiating the direction that Missouri would go, and if my memory is right, Lyons found out that the governor of Missouri was recruiting militiamen from around the countryside of Missouri and bringing them in. They were going to attempt to bring them into St. Louis and take over and capture the Union Depot here. And Lyons found out and marched his infantry to their encampment outside of St. Louis. I think, were they in Jefferson? I don't remember, but somewhere outside of St. Louis. Or was it in Jefferson? Jesus, my memory is not great. Essentially, Lyons attacked first and was able to scatter the Missouri militiamen that were gathering under the banner of the Missouri governor, and he was able to, I believe he was able to capture Jefferson, and prevent Missouri from declaring for the Confederacy. I believe that I think a couple of months later, maybe a year later, Nathaniel Lyons, I believe then a general, a brevetted general, was killed in a battle. Which is why, we don't remember him as well as, let's say, Sherman or Grant or Thomas. But he was one of the first sort of Union heroes in the Civil War because of his actions to prevent Missouri from declaring for the Confederacy. Did I say Union? He prevented Missouri from declaring for the Confederacy. Okay. So he's not yet appeared on our map yet, but I'm sure in due time he will. Kentucky at this time in the war was neutral. It had not declared one way or another. Historically, they declared for the Union. And I believe they did so because the South invaded. The Confederacy took up defensive positions, and by doing so, you know what? I don't remember exactly. What I do know for sure is that the Kentucky eventually declared for the Union, and Southern troops moved in to try and capture Louisville and Lexington, but the North likewise crossed the river and was able to push them south. So eventually, Kentucky historically declared for the Union, and I hope that it will do so in this game. Okay, these are Indiana volunteers that cannot move yet in 3 turns. Okay. I am going to attach these volunteers to McClellan, and I will do so because of a very special trait that McClellan has. Historically, he trained up the Army of the Potomac I believe that was the name of the army that he controlled. Basically, when he was moved out east and became the commander of the primary Union army, he spent months and months training the soldiers up. And to reflect that, this game gave him the trait of being a training officer. And if you read this here, it states that this leader will train up to 2 regiments of conscripts to regular soldiers every turn in their force under his command. And this ability applies if the leader is in command of the stack. So if he is not in command, then it will not apply. The other traits that he has are that he is a good administrator. So he cares for his men and their well-being, and this provides a 15% increase in the fatigue recovery rates of units in the stack under his command. The third trait he has is that he has a poor spy network. Faults of intelligence worsen the detection of enemy units within the department where the force under the command of this general is located. That is also historically accurate. McClellan had notoriously, time and time again, overestimated the Confederate forces opposing him. He became much too cautious because of it, and that became his ultimate demise, especially during the Peninsula Campaign when he landed troops on the peninsula here. What is this called again? Good God. Anyway, he landed folks around Fort Monroe, moved them up through Hampton Roads, passed through Williamsburg, and just, he could see Richmond, but he stopped short because he was afraid of what was in front of him. He was afraid that there were hundreds of thousands of Confederate troops opposing him, and he called on Union forces gathered outside of Alexandria to march down through Fredericksburg to flank Richmond from the north. And he sat there waiting for that to happen because he thought there were just so many Confederate forces in front of him. So historically, McClellan was not a very good general. But in this game, the best trait about him is that he is able to train conscripts into regular soldiers. So what does that mean, right? So you have here volunteers, right? These are 2 volunteer brigades. If we click on them, you can see that they are volunteers. They are militias. This is the 1st Ohio Militia. This is the 2nd Ohio Militia, or the 2nd Ohio Volunteers. And also attached is the 3rd Ohio Volunteers. They are a light infantry unit. They are not conscripts. They are not volunteers. They are not militia. So what does it mean to train up conscripts? So because he's in command of this unit, of this command of the stack, after I end this turn, and once we come to the next turn, these 2 volunteer units will be upgraded to regular infantry troops, like these guys here, right? So they have a combat power of 36. The volunteers have a combat power. Where can I find that? Okay, I mean, right now it shows 68, but that's because it's the combined combat power of all 3 of these elements, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd volunteers of Ohio Volunteers. Maybe I can look on the recruitment menu. Okay, great. So 1 volunteer unit has a combat power of 15, right? And so volunteers and conscripts and militia are weaker on a pound for pound basis compared to regular U.S. infantry, right? So one unit of U.S. infantry has 36, and that's a little more than double what volunteers have. And so, just passively, turn after turn, McClellan can train up 2 militia units, 2 conscript units, into regular U.S. infantry, thereby doubling the combat power of our units for free, right? So that is incredibly powerful. There will be 2 more generals in the Union who have this trait. My memory is that the one is Henry Halleck. Who's the other? I don't remember right now, but he spawns in a little later. So my intention is to maybe have 2 generals in the West who are training militia up, and then 1 general in the East who is training militia up. And I think that general will be McClellan. I think I'll move him from Cincinnati into maybe Baltimore or Philly, where I'll have conscripts from all over these eastern states converging on McClellan so that he can train them up turn after turn into regular U.S. infantry, and then sending those infantry units, the regular infantry units, into battle. Okay, so that's McClellan. I don't think that this red band impacts his ability to train them up, but we will see. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure that as long as he's in command, even though he can't move this turn, even though that they're all locked in this region, I think that they still are able to upgrade. Okay. To go back to that riot in Baltimore, right? So we see here that this icon states that the rail network of this region has been destroyed, and that's an in-game reflection of that riot, right? And so the way that we fix this rail is that we click on the 1st Maryland Brigade, or really any unit that's stationed in this region, and we click on this hammer, and we click Rebuild Rail. And it should only take 1 turn for the rail to be rebuilt. But we want to do that because there are troops that are amassing in New York, in Brooklyn, and primarily in Brooklyn, and they are being railed down into DC to defend DC, right? And as you can see here, the rail travels along, through New Jersey, into Philly, and down into Baltimore, and then into DC. But because the rail here in Baltimore region is broken, those troops coming down would have to, again, use the train to come down on Baltimore and then march on foot, right, down into DC. And let's just see that, right? So as I did earlier, the cavalry unit under Schurz, let's say that I want to move them into DC, right? The AI automatically believes that it will be the quickest to march them along this path. But let's say that we want to move them along by rail. We can do that by clicking this tent, right? Oh no, I'm sorry. By clicking the the crossed firearms, right? And we can see that we can enter New York. We can force march them. We can synchronize movement with other units, or we can move by rail, right? So we click this unit. Let's see what happens. So we click it. And so before we were arriving in 24 days, that means that we were going to arrive in late May. That's 2 turns. But if we do it by rail, we will arrive in 13 days. So that's the very next turn, right? But it really doesn't take, right? It shouldn't take 13 days to get down here. And it does take 13 days because, again, the rail here is destroyed. So you see here, it'll take 1 day to get into Rockland, the second day to Essex, the third day to Warren, and again, the fourth day into Philly, the fifth into Montgomery County or Montgomery region, Westchester, Pennsylvania. And again, it takes 1 day, right, to move from region to region when you're on the rail. But as soon as you reach Baltimore, and because the rail network is destroyed, they have to get off the train and move by foot. And by moving by foot, they double the time in which it takes them to move into DC. So from 6 to 7, 7 to 13. It takes them 13 days to march from, it takes them 6 days to march from Baltimore to DC, right? And so by repairing this rail network, it should take them 7, 8, 9 days instead of 13 to arrive in DC. And so why is that important, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, they will still get there by the next turn. But it's important because, let's say, for example, that there are Confederate forces moving to capture DC. If they arrive, let's say, in 8 days, that means that Schurz's force will arrive much too late to support whatever units will be here. But if we had a train and this rail wasn't destroyed, Schurz's forces would make it in time to support the units in DC. So that's why that matters. And just for example's sake, in demonstration purposes, right? So let's declick the rail movement and let's see how long it takes to move via ships. Okay, it's not quicker. It's not quicker. But again, for demonstration purpose, I will show you. You can manually click river movement. It really means just, movement by sea, and it'll, again, we have 27 points here. So if we click and hold Schurz and we move him into the lower bay, it'll take us 3 days to move onto ships there, but we can then click and continue to drag and move him around the peninsula in Maryland and up the Chesapeake Bay, and then into the Potomac, and then into DC. That would take 47 days. That is a long time, and that is why the AI didn't think it was a good idea. And it's not. The best way to do that is to move by rail. And as we see here, we have 147 rail units. Let's just call them units. By clicking rail and using the rail to get there, the available units left are 145. Right? Okay. So that's all for demonstration. I don't even know that I want him to move there yet. Maybe I want him to consolidate people in New York first. But let's, again, take stock of what we have in the north. So in New York now, we have the 1st New York Brigade that is unable to move for another 3 turns. We have the New York Volunteers, the German volunteers that Schurz recruited. We have French's Brigade that we recruited last turn, and we have the other units that were already here, and they've got a star, which refers to their combat ability. So the more stars, rather not the more stars, but if you have a star, it means that you've got experience, and as you gain experience, it moves from a bronze star to a silver star to a gold star. And I don't know if there's more. The campaign that I played last ended before I could find out if there was a star above gold. So I will just, because of neatness, for now I will combine. Do I want Schurz to move down right now? Sure, I think I will. I'll just combine these 4 units because they can't move yet. And I will have Schurz move to DC. Do I want him to Harper's Ferry first? Let's see what is in DC before I do that. Okay. So no troops have been deployed in DC that I can move. Only generals. Okay. All right. Let's move him to Fredericktown because I want him to capture Harper's Ferry. Can I just move him there now? Okay, great. Let's see if that works. Hopefully the units in Winchester do not move to Harper's Ferry, but I want Schurz and his cavalry regiment to capture Harper's Ferry. And I want him to do that because it would deny the Confederates an armory that produces industrial capacity. Yeah, so I want him to be able to do that. Let's see what else. I don't think anything else happened. I don't think I have any more units that I can move. Okay. Here are, along the bottom here, are more event details that you can read, right? And if you can click on these scripted events, and you can click here to read them. We've read most of them. So only 3 armies can be formed at this time. Virginia secedes. There are more generals awaiting to be appointed. Command in the capital. Oh, wow. Okay, so the Confederacy has promised territorial concessions, which means they want the foreign powers to join them. They've also decided to put a complete embargo on cotton. This is a costly measure, has caused the foreign powers to change their opinion to not enter the war. We have decided to inspect any. Yes, this is our blockade. The Confederacy has decided to declare a complete cotton embargo. Okay. So the reason historically that the Confederacy decided to embargo cotton, meaning that they refused to send the cotton they produced to European powers in hopes of using it as leverage to get them to either recognize the Confederacy as an independent state and or to join them in their war for independence. It didn't work out for them as intended. Eventually, the United Kingdom and France resented the Confederates' decision to embargo cotton and pushed the foreign powers further away from the Confederacy. And that's not even speaking to the fact that the Confederacy promoted slavery and their cause was to preserve slavery in those states, juxtaposed to Britain and France, who had abolished slavery in their empires at that point in time. Okay. I think I will try and stop recording pretty soon. But again, these are scripted event messages. These are events relating to battles. These are events related to movements. These are messages related to replacement levies and new units or recruitment. This is control. Okay, this sort of shows you changes in control of regions. And then this is just miscellaneous, sort of like capturing everything else. So an outpost is under construction. Where is it? In Mississippi. Okay, cool. You're building an outpost here in Mississippi. Interesting. Transport ships in shipping lanes transported 17 sorry, 1,700, yes, supplies from overseas. And, sir, our merchant fleet and shipping lanes has delivered 8 money and 20 wars. Okay, got it. We can describe that next time. What do I want to describe? Lastly, as you saw earlier, we cannot recruit generals. Generals are spawned in at the, I believe, at the beginning of every calendar year. But in this case, these generals respond in at the start of the game, because these are generals that were historically available to the Union at the start of the war in 1861, right? So these are Erasmus Keyes and Lewis Wallace, Hamilton and Milroy, Shields, and all these folks. None of them are particularly good, right? But we will have to make do. Better generals are on the way for the Union. Okay. I will stop there. Next time, we will organize our armies and send them in places that we want to go, our generals particularly. We will use our money to recruit more troops, and we will make decisions on these decision cards, and we will, and I think that's it. Will we read these things? I think we'll probably read these things as well, these messages. But yes, I will have to stop there. I will save